In this video, we're going to add chords to a melody using both root position chords and inversions. I'll explain what inversions are, what they're used for, then we'll add chords to some example melodies to see how they can make music more interesting and satisfying to listen to. And finally, I'll leave you with some homework so you can actually try inversions out for yourself. A root position chord means you have the root of the chord in the bass. The root of the chord is also the letter name of the chord. So the root of C minor is C, the root of A major is A, and so on. An inversion is when you have some chord tone other than the root in the bass. So let's look at that A major chord again. The pitches in A major are A, C sharp, and E. A is the root, C sharp is the third, and E is the fifth. If instead of the A, we put the C sharp in the bass, we have inverted the chord. Because the third is the first chord tone after the root, we call this the first inversion. We can write this as A/C sharp, which is read as A over C sharp. The interval from the C sharp up to the root is a 6, so in traditional harmony, we also call this a 6 chord. If this was the 1 chord, it would be 1/6. If we go to the second chord tone after the root, we get E, the chord's fifth. A chord with its fifth in the bass is in second inversion. The fifth in the bass creates the intervals of a 6th and a 4th, so we call it a 6/4 chord. So far, we've had root position, the first inversion, which is to put the third in the bass, the second inversion, which is to put the fifth in the bass. Last time in the series, we introduced 7th chords, so we can actually go a step further. After root position, third in the bass, fifth in the bass, the 7th in the bass would be the third inversion. If instead of A major, we had A dominant 7, for example, with the pitches A, C sharp, E, G, that would mean the third inversion would be A7 with G in the bass. In traditional harmony, this is also called a 4/2 chord because the intervals between that 7th in the bass and the root and third above create a 4th and 2nd. Now pay attention to this next bit because it can confuse a lot of people. The order of the rest of the notes in the chord doesn't matter. As long as A is in the bass, any one of these chords is root position. And as long as C sharp is in the bass, any one of these A major chords is considered in first inversion. We can call these different voicings or different positions, but the inversion refers specifically to the bottom note, or what chord tone is in the bass. And of course, it doesn't have to literally be a bass, like a bass guitar or something. We just call the bottom note the bass of the chord. Okay, so that's what inversions are, but what are we supposed to do with them? Most of the time, you're gonna run into root position chords. A chord in root position is stable and solid. If you've been watching the series so far, this is episode 4, we've been using only root position chords this entire time, so you should have a pretty good idea of what they sound and feel like. First inversion chords, on the other hand, are a bit lighter. It's almost like they have a slight leaning of motion and energy. By having the third in the bottom instead of the root, there's not so much of a heavy weight holding down the chord. Most of the time, you'll want to balance a mix of root position and some first inversion chords, because you'll get that mix of stability and movement, as well as more interesting bass lines. So let's do an example of that before we look at second and third inversion. For our first example, we'll use the melody of Legend of the Divine Dragon from Fire Emblem, Mystery of the Emblem. For these first 4 chords, I could very easily go back and forth between root position A minor and E minor 7. But another option, now that I have inversions in my toolkit, is to put the E minor 7 in first inversion. Now I get this nice stepwise movement in the bass line, and it creates a nice counterpoint with this melody. Let's keep going. For the next phrase, I have more options. I could go A minor 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, A minor 7. Or we could try A minor 7, F, G7, A minor 7. I like the fresh color of the F major chord, and I like the stepwise bass line. But the G7 chord feels a bit too bright for me there. So thanks again to inversions, we can keep our stepwise bass line, but darken the chord to E minor 7 over G. Notice how the inversions are giving us a lot more subtle control of the way things feel now. And here's how it sounds with a bit of color. Before we get to the next part, let's move on to second inversions. A second inversion chord is when you have the chord's fifth in the bass. For example, F major in second inversion would be F with C in the bass, or F over C. The weird thing about second inversion chords is that they're kind of ambiguous and unstable. In our example chord, F over C, notice how the C creates an interval of a fourth with F, the root of the chord. The interval of a fourth has a tendency to pull downwards into a relaxed third. And in many contexts, when I hear a second inversion chord, that's exactly what I'm expecting it to do. So there are three situations where you'll normally use a triad in second inversion, otherwise you're probably better off avoiding it. Notice I said triad. A seventh chord in second inversion doesn't have the same restrictions, and you can use it more freely. It took me a long time to realize that. I'd actually misunderstood that fact about seventh chords in second inversion. I thought they had the same restrictions as triads, but they don't. It's something I talk about in a video where I show how John Williams uses them to modulate to different keys. I'll put a link to that up here somewhere and down in the description if you want to check that video out. Anyway, let's get back to triads in second inversion. The three times you'll usually use a second inversion chord, or 6/4 chord, are the pedal 6/4, the passing 6/4, and the cadential 6/4. The pedal 6/4 is when you hold the same note down in the bass, which is called a pedal, and change the chord on top. The passing 6/4 is when you pass from one inversion of a chord to another. For example, one in root position to one in first inversion, and you want stepwise motion in the bass. So here I have C going to C over E. To make a nice C, D, E bass line, I can insert G over D between them, which is a passing 6/4. The other way you'll usually use a second inversion chord is as a cadential 6/4. This is a way to decorate the cadence and emphasize the 5 chord before resolving back to 1. So you use 1 in second inversion. For example, if we're in the key of D and our cadence is A to D, we can back that up with D over A, D. Here's the Monster Hunter theme we used in the last video about seventh chords. I'll use a pedal 6/4 for the first 3 chords, and I'll use a cadential 6/4 in the second to last chord. And finally, we have third inversion chords. Remember from the explanation before at the beginning, third inversion means we have the seventh of the chord in the bass. This is a cool sound, but it's also very unstable. In traditional harmony, the seventh of the chord needs to be treated in a very specific way. And although we aren't really as strict in modern styles, it's still good to know, because it always sounds good, and it's probably what you want to do the majority of the time. The rule or guideline for the seventh of the chord is that it should move down by step. And this is especially noticeable if the 7th is an outer voice, like your melody or your bass line. I'll show you 2 examples of how we could use this by going back to Musical Hall from Pokemon Black and White, our main theme we've been using for the whole series. To refresh, here's how the first 8 bars of the theme sound, harmonized with root position 7th chords. I like the first 4 bars in root position, but there are 2 spots in the second phrase where we could use first inversion chords. We could change this G minor to G minor over B flat, and this F major 7 to F major 7 over A. Now here's where the third inversion chord comes in. In bar 4, we have that D minor 7 chord. But what if we use the 7th of the chord as a passing tone, as a way to have the bass line move down from the D to the B flat? And in bar 6, what if we kept the B flat in the bass, changing the C7 to C7 over B flat? Remember, our rule is that the 7th has to move down by step. That's exactly what it does, moving down from B flat to A, the base of our F major 7 in first inversion. Here it is with just the melody and bass line. If you found this video interesting or helpful and you want to help support the work I'm doing, please consider joining my Patreon. You get early access to videos, exclusive members-only content, and I'll also be posting the MIDI and Dorico files from this video. The homework this time is to go back to your harmonizations from the first 3 videos and see where you can change some of the root position chords to inverted chords. If you haven't been doing the homework, or you didn't even know that was a thing, you can find it on my Discord server. I'll put a link down below the like button. This is part 4 in the Choose Chords series. When it's ready, I'll put part 5 right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.